Part 1: A Night to Remember. Emily Jacobs had always believed in living life to the fullest. She was the kind of woman who rarely thought twice about an impulsive decision, whether it was booking a last-minute flight to a tropical destination or staying out late with friends on a weeknight just because it felt like the right thing to do. At 29, she had a good job as a freelance graphic designer, a group of close friends, and a reputation for being the life of every party. She liked to think that she had everything figured out, at least for now. Relationships? They weren't really on her radar. The truth was, Emily had never been the type to get too emotionally invested in relationships. They were fun, sure, but not something she felt she needed to focus on. Her life was busy and full without the complications of love, commitment, or anything that tied her down. To Emily, life was all about experiences, spontaneous, fleeting moments that she could cherish and move on from, without the need for anything too serious. But sometimes, life had a way of surprising you when you least expected it. It all started on a Saturday night when Emily's best friend, Samantha, convinced her to come out to a party in the city. "Come on, Em, you can't work every weekend," Samantha had insisted over the phone. "You need to let loose a little. You've been too focused on that big project of yours." Emily had hesitated. She had been working long hours on a major project for a client, and part of her just wanted to stay in for the night, have a glass of wine, and watch Netflix. But Samantha had a point. She had been working too much, and a night out might be exactly what she needed. "Fine," Emily had relented with a sigh. "But I'm not staying out late. I have a deadline on Monday." "You always say that," Samantha had laughed, knowing full well that Emily's not staying out late usually meant stumbling home at 3 a.m. after dancing the night away. When Emily arrived at the party, she was immediately glad she had come. The atmosphere was lively, with music pumping through the speakers and people scattered across the large rooftop terrace, chatting and laughing under the city lights. The skyline stretched out before her, a shimmering reminder of how alive the city felt at night. "Emily," Samantha had called out, waving her over to a group of their friends near the bar. "I'm so glad you made it." "Wouldn't miss it," Emily had replied, hugging her friend. "Though I still have a ton of work to do tomorrow." "Tomorrow can wait," Samantha had said with a mischievous grin, handing Emily a cocktail. "Tonight's all about having fun." Emily had taken a sip of her drink, feeling the familiar warmth of alcohol spreading through her body. As she looked around the party, her eyes landed on a man standing by the railing, gazing out at the view. He was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair that looked effortlessly tousled. His face was handsome, but there was something about his expression that caught her attention. He looked thoughtful, maybe even a little lost in his own world. "Who's that?" Emily had asked, nodding toward the man. Samantha had followed her gaze and smiled knowingly. "That's Ryan. He's a friend of Alex's. Works in finance, I think." "Why? You interested?" Emily had shrugged nonchalantly, though her curiosity was piqued. "Just wondering." "Well, don't just wonder, go talk to him," Samantha had encouraged with a wink. Emily had rolled her eyes playfully but took a deep breath and made her way over to where Ryan was standing. As she approached, she could feel the usual rush of adrenaline that came with meeting someone new. She wasn't nervous, she never got nervous in these situations, but there was something about him that made her heart beat just a little faster. "Hey," she had said, leaning against the railing beside him. "Great view, huh?" Ryan had turned to her, his expression shifting from distant to intrigued. "Yeah, it's pretty incredible," he had replied, his voice deep and smooth. "I'm Ryan, by the way." Emily, she had introduced herself, flashing him a smile. "So, how do you know Alex?" Ryan had chuckled softly, taking a sip of his drink. "We used to work together a few years ago. He's been trying to get me to come out to one of these parties for a while, so I figured I'd finally make an appearance." "Well, I'm glad you did," Emily had said, her smile widening. "I was just thinking this party needed more mysterious strangers." Ryan had laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Mysterious, huh? I'm not sure about that, but I'll take it." They had spent the next hour talking, and Emily found herself more intrigued by him with each passing minute. He was smart, funny, and easy to talk to, and there was a certain ease about him that made her feel comfortable. As the conversation flowed, she had started to feel a connection that she hadn't expected. But Emily was nothing if not practical. She wasn't looking for anything serious, and this was just a party. Or so she thought. As the night wore on, the drinks flowed, and the music got louder. Emily and Ryan found themselves gravitating closer to each other. There was an undeniable chemistry between them, a spark that neither of them could ignore. And by the time the party started to wind down, the two of them were practically inseparable. "Do you want to get out of here?" Ryan had asked, his voice low and suggestive as they stood close, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. Emily had hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Yeah, let's go." They had ended up at Ryan's apartment, a sleek and modern place that felt like it belonged in a magazine. But Emily hadn't been paying much attention to the decor, her focus had been entirely on him. The night had passed in a blur of heated kisses, whispered laughter, and tangled sheets. It had been fun, spontaneous, and exactly what Emily had expected. When she woke up the next morning, the sunlight streaming through the curtains, Emily had felt a familiar sense of satisfaction. She had always been good at keeping things casual, and this had been no different. It was a fun night, but now it was time to move on. She had a deadline to meet, after all. Carefully, she had slipped out of bed, trying not to wake Ryan as she gathered her clothes from the floor. But just as she was about to make her exit, she heard his voice behind her. "Leaving already?" Emily had turned to see Ryan propped up on one elbow, his hair messy and his expression soft with sleep. He didn't look annoyed or upset, just curious. "Yeah," Emily had replied with a small smile. "I've got work to do." "Last night was fun though." Ryan had nodded, his eyes lingering on her for a moment longer than she had expected. "It was. But you don't have to rush off. We could grab breakfast or something." Emily had blinked, caught off guard. Breakfast? That wasn't part of the plan. She had expected a clean, easy break, the kind of morning after where they both went their separate ways without any complications. I really have to get home," she had said, trying to sound casual. Ryan had smiled, though there was a hint of disappointment in his eyes. "No worries. Maybe another time." Emily had nodded quickly, pulling on her shoes and heading for the door. "Yeah, maybe." As she stepped out of the apartment and into the cool morning air, Emily had felt a strange sense of unease. She had been in this situation before, plenty of times, actually, and it had never felt like this. She had always been good at keeping things light and casual, at walking away without a second thought. But something about Ryan had gotten under her skin. "Don't overthink it," she had told herself as she made her way back to her own apartment. It was just one night. But as the days went by, Emily couldn't stop thinking about him. Every time she tried to focus on work, her mind drifted back to their conversation, to the way he had made her laugh, to the look in his eyes when he had asked her to stay for breakfast. It was supposed to be a one-night stand. But for the first time in a long time, Emily wasn't sure if she was ready to walk away. Part 2, Feelings Unraveled. Days passed after that morning, but no matter how much Emily tried to focus on her work or distract herself with her usual routine, Ryan kept creeping back into her thoughts. It was frustrating. She prided herself on her independence, on her ability to move on without emotional entanglements. But for some reason, this time felt different. By midweek, Emily found herself scrolling through her phone more often than usual, checking for messages even though she knew she hadn't given Ryan her number. It wasn't like her to dwell on a one-night stand. She usually didn't even remember the guy's name after a day or two. But Ryan had made an impression, and that bothered her more than she wanted to admit. Samantha, of course, was the first to notice that something was off. "Okay, spill it," she said over lunch on Thursday afternoon. They were sitting outside at their favorite cafe, and Samantha had been watching Emily's distracted behavior with growing amusement. "You've been weird all week. What's going on?" Emily sighed, putting her phone down and stirring her iced coffee absent-mindedly. "Nothing's going on." Samantha gave her a pointed look. "Come on, Em. I know you better than that. Is this about work? Or is it about that guy from the party?" Emily bit her lip, her mind immediately flashing back to Ryan. She hadn't told Samantha much about what happened after the party, just that she had left with Ryan. But now, the memory of that night, and the confusing feelings that followed, was nagging at her. "I don't know," Emily admitted, leaning back in her chair. "It's just, I can't stop thinking about him. It was supposed to be a one-night thing, but he keeps popping into my head." Samantha raised an eyebrow, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Interesting. So, the notorious Emily Jacobs is finally caught up on a guy? I never thought I'd see the day." "Don't make this a big deal," Emily grumbled, though she couldn't help but smile at Samantha's teasing. "It's not like that. It's just different." "Different how?" Samantha asked, leaning forward with interest. Emily sighed again, feeling the weight of her own confusion. "I don't know. He asked me to stay for breakfast, and I said no. But now I'm wondering if I should have stayed. I mean, it's not like I want a relationship or anything. I'm not even sure what I want. But there was something about him. I can't explain it." Samantha looked thoughtful for a moment before shrugging. Maybe you don't have to explain it. Maybe it's just one of those things you need to figure out as you go. You don't have to have everything planned out, Em. Emily frowned, stirring her coffee again. Yeah, but you know how I am. I like things to be clear-cut. Simple. No strings attached. This feels complicated. Maybe complicated isn't such a bad thing, Samantha suggested. You've been doing the whole no strings attached thing for years, and it's worked for you. But maybe this is a chance to try something different. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Emily rolled her eyes. The worst? It turns into a mess, and I end up regretting it. You know I'm not cut out for relationships. I don't have the time or the energy for that kind of drama. Samantha laughed, shaking her head. You always think relationships have to be some big, dramatic ordeal. But they don't. Sometimes they're just easy. Maybe this thing with Ryan doesn't have to be complicated. Maybe it's just about getting to know someone and seeing where it goes. Emily considered Samantha's words for a moment, her mind still racing with conflicting thoughts. Part of her wanted to reach out to Ryan, to see if there was something more there. But the other part of her, the part that had spent years avoiding anything that resembled commitment, was hesitant. What if she got too close? What if things got messy, and she ended up regretting it? I don't know, Sam, Emily said finally, shaking her head. I'm not used to this. I'm not sure if I'm ready for whatever this is. Samantha smiled sympathetically. You don't have to be ready for anything, Em. Just take it one step at a time. You don't have to commit to anything. But if you're still thinking about him, maybe that's a sign that you should give it a chance. Emily sighed, knowing that Samantha was right. She wasn't sure what she wanted, but she couldn't deny that Ryan had gotten under her skin. And as much as she tried to push him out of her mind, the thought of him lingered like a whisper at the back of her consciousness. Later that evening, as Emily sat in her apartment, staring at her laptop screen and trying to focus on her latest project, she found herself replaying the night she had spent with Ryan over and over in her mind. It wasn't just the physical attraction that had left an impression, it was the way he had looked at her, the way he had made her laugh, the way he had made her feel different. Maybe Samantha was right. Maybe this was a chance to try something new, to let go of her need for control and see where things led. But was she really ready for that? Just as she was contemplating this, her phone buzzed on the table beside her. She glanced at the screen and froze. It was a text from an unknown number. Hey, Emily. It's Ryan. Hope you don't mind that I got your number from Alex. I was wondering if you'd like to grab coffee sometime. Emily stared at the message, her heart skipping a beat. Of all the things she had been expecting, this wasn't one of them. She hadn't given him her number, so the fact that he had gone out of his way to get it from a mutual friend surprised her. But more than that, the message itself left her feeling something. Coffee. Simple. Casual. Nothing too serious. For a moment, Emily hesitated, her finger hovering over the keyboard as she tried to decide what to do. Part of her wanted to say no, to keep things as uncomplicated as possible. But another part of her, the part that had been thinking about him for days, wanted to say yes. What's the harm? She thought to herself. It's just coffee. No big deal. Before she could change her mind, she typed out a quick reply, sure. Coffee sounds good. When and where? His response came quickly, how about Saturday morning? There's a great cafe near the park. I'll send you the address. Emily exhaled, feeling a mix of anticipation and nervousness. Saturday morning. Coffee with Ryan. It wasn't a date, she reminded herself. It was just two people getting to know each other. Nothing more. But as she put her phone down and tried to focus on her work, she couldn't shake the feeling that this might be the start of something she wasn't prepared for. Saturday morning arrived quicker than Emily had anticipated, and as she stood in front of her closet, trying to decide what to wear, she found herself feeling more nervous than she had expected. It wasn't like her to overthink these kinds of things, but something about this felt different. She wanted to make a good impression, but at the same time, she didn't want to overdo it. Finally, she settled on a simple yet flattering outfit, skinny jeans, a white blouse, and a light jacket. Casual but put together. She didn't want to give the impression that she had put too much thought into it, even though she had. As she made her way to the cafe, Emily's mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. What if the coffee was awkward? What if they had nothing to talk about? What if he was expecting something more, and she wasn't ready for that? When she arrived at the cafe, she spotted Ryan sitting at a table outside, a cup of coffee in front of him and his phone in hand. He looked up as she approached, a smile spreading across his face. Hey, he said, standing up to greet her. Glad you could make it. Of course, Emily replied, her nerves easing slightly at the sight of his warm smile. Thanks for inviting me. They sat down, and for a moment, there was a brief silence as they both sipped their coffees. But to Emily's surprise, the awkwardness she had feared didn't last. Ryan was easy to talk to, and their conversation flowed effortlessly, much like it had the night of the party. They talked about everything from work to travel to their favorite books and movies. Emily found herself laughing at Ryan's dry sense of humor, and as the conversation continued, she realized just how much she enjoyed his company. There was something about him that put her at ease, something that made her feel like she didn't have to be anyone but herself. So, Ryan said after a while, leaning back in his chair and studying her with a curious expression. I have to ask, why didn't you stay for breakfast? Emily blinked, caught off guard by the question. I don't know. I guess I just thought it would be easier if I left. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Easier? For who? Emily shrugged, feeling a bit self-conscious. For both of us, I guess. I'm not really the type to stick around after, you know. Ryan nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. Yeah, I got that impression. But I don't know. I kind of thought there was more to it than just that night. Emily felt her heart skip a beat at his words. You did? Yeah, Ryan said with a small smile. I mean, I'm not saying we have to turn this into some big, serious thing. But I liked spending time with you, and I guess I was hoping it wouldn't just be a one-time thing. Emily's mind raced as she processed his words. This was exactly the kind of thing she had been trying to avoid, getting too close, letting things get too complicated. But as she looked at Ryan, sitting across from her with that easy smile and those kind eyes, she realized that maybe it wasn't so bad. Maybe, just maybe, it was worth seeing where this could go. I liked spending time with you too, Emily admitted, her voice soft but sincere. And I'm open to seeing what happens. Ryan's smile widened, and for the first time in days, Emily felt a sense of relief. Maybe this didn't have to be complicated. Maybe it could just be easy. Part 3: Coffee and Confessions. As the weeks passed, Emily and Ryan's connection grew stronger, much to Emily's surprise. What had started as a casual coffee date turned into regular meetups, sometimes for breakfast, sometimes for lunch, and occasionally for a late-night drink after work. They didn't call it dating, at least not out loud, but there was no denying that whatever was happening between them was becoming more than just a fleeting connection. For Emily, this was new territory. She had always been the type to keep things casual, to enjoy the fun and excitement of a new connection without letting it turn into something more serious. But with Ryan, things felt different. She found herself looking forward to their time together, genuinely enjoying his company in a way that went beyond just physical attraction. They had fun together, whether they were grabbing coffee at a local cafe or spending hours talking about everything under the sun. Ryan had a way of making her feel comfortable, like she didn't have to put up her usual defenses around him. He didn't push her to define what they were or where they were going, he was just present. Still, as much as Emily enjoyed spending time with him, she couldn't help but feel a nagging sense of unease. This wasn't what she was used to. She had always been careful about not letting things get too serious. The idea of commitment, of letting someone get close enough to hurt her, had always made her nervous. And now, with Ryan, she felt like she was standing on the edge of something she wasn't sure she was ready for. One evening, after spending the day together, Emily found herself lying in bed, staring up at the ceiling as her mind raced with thoughts of Ryan. She had told herself from the beginning that this was just a casual thing, that she wasn't looking for a relationship. But now, weeks into whatever this was, she couldn't deny that her feelings for him were growing. "What are you doing, Emily?" she thought to herself. This wasn't supposed to happen. You were supposed to keep it casual, keep it simple. But even as she thought this, she knew that things were no longer simple. She liked Ryan more than she had expected to. And that scared her. The next morning, Emily woke up to a text from Ryan, "Hey, want to grab brunch later?" She stared at the message for a few moments, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. Part of her wanted to say yes, to see him and enjoy their time together. But another part of her, the part that was always cautious, always afraid of getting too close, hesitated. What's the harm in brunch? She asked herself. It's just brunch. Before she could second-guess herself, she typed out a reply, "Sure, sounds good." "Where should we meet?" Ryan responded quickly with the name of a cozy brunch spot downtown, and they made plans to meet there in a couple of hours. Emily put her phone down and took a deep breath, trying to shake off the feeling of unease that had been creeping up on her. She reminded herself that she didn't have to define anything, that she could take things one step at a time. But as she got ready for brunch, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was turning into something more than she had anticipated. When Emily arrived at the brunch spot, Ryan was already there, sitting at a table by the window with a cup of coffee in hand. He smiled as she approached, standing up to greet her with a hug. "Hey, you," he said warmly. "Glad you could make it." "Of course," Emily replied, smiling as she sat down. "You know I can't say no to brunch." Ryan chuckled, handing her a menu. "They have the best pancakes here. Trust me." As they ordered their food and settled into the conversation, Emily found herself relaxing. Ryan had a way of making her feel at ease, like she didn't have to overthink everything. They talked about their week, about work, about the random things they had seen on social media. It was light, easy, and fun, the way it had always been with Ryan. But as they finished their meal and the conversation began to wind down, Ryan's expression shifted slightly, becoming more serious. "So," he said, leaning back in his chair and studying her. "I've been meaning to ask, how are you feeling about all of this?" Emily blinked, caught off guard by the question. "All of what?" "You know," Ryan said with a small smile. "Us. Whatever this is." Emily's heart skipped a beat at his words, and she felt a familiar sense of panic rising in her chest. This was exactly the kind of conversation she had been trying to avoid, the kind that forced her to confront her feelings, to define what was happening between them. She had been content to let things happen naturally, without putting a label on it. But now, Ryan was asking her to do just that. "I don't know," Emily said slowly, trying to choose her words carefully. "I mean, I've been having a really great time with you. But I guess I wasn't really expecting this." Ryan raised an eyebrow, his expression curious. "This? You mean us spending time together?" "Yeah," Emily said, her voice soft. "I just didn't expect it to turn into something more. And I don't know. I'm not really good at this kind of thing." Ryan's smile was gentle, understanding. "I get that. I wasn't expecting it either. But I like spending time with you, Emily. And I'm not in a rush to figure everything out. I just want to know where you're at." Emily exhaled, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. Ryan wasn't pushing her for answers, but he was being honest about his feelings. And now, she had to be honest too. "I like spending time with you too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I guess I'm just scared. I've never been good at relationships. I'm used to keeping things casual, you know? No strings attached." Ryan nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I get that. And I'm not asking for anything you're not ready for. But I think there's something here, between us. Don't you?" Emily's heart raced as she processed his words. He was right, there was something between them, something that went beyond the casual connections she was used to. But admitting that, acknowledging it, felt like stepping into uncharted territory. "Yeah," Emily said softly. "I think there is." Ryan smiled, his eyes warm and full of understanding. "That's all I wanted to hear." They finished their brunch in comfortable silence, and as they left the cafe, Emily felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. She had been honest with Ryan, something she wasn't always great at, and he had accepted her feelings without pushing her for more than she was ready to give. As they walked down the street together, Ryan reached for her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. It was a simple gesture, but it sent a surge of warmth through Emily's chest. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she could let her guard down, even just a little. Over the next few weeks, Emily and Ryan's relationship continued to grow, though neither of them used the word relationship to describe it. They spent more and more time together, enjoying each other's company in a way that felt natural and easy. They didn't talk about the future or try to define what they were, they simply let things unfold. For Emily, this was new territory. She had never been in a relationship that felt so uncomplicated. There were no games, no pressure to be someone she wasn't. With Ryan, she could just be herself, and that was enough. But even as things between them felt easy, Emily couldn't shake the nagging fear that it was all too good to be true. She had been in relationships before, casual flings that had fizzled out as quickly as they had started, and she knew how easily things could fall apart. And as much as she liked Ryan, she couldn't help but wonder if this was just another fleeting connection, something that would burn out once the initial excitement wore off. One evening, after spending the day together, Emily found herself lying in bed, staring up at the ceiling as her mind raced with thoughts of Ryan. She liked him, a lot more than she had expected to. But she couldn't ignore the voice in the back of her mind telling her to be careful, to keep her guard up. "Don't get too close," the voice whispered. "Don't let yourself get hurt." But even as she thought this, Emily knew that she was already in too deep. She had let Ryan into her life in a way that she hadn't let anyone in before. And now, there was no turning back. As the days went by, Emily tried to push her doubts aside and focus on the present. She enjoyed spending time with Ryan, and for now, that was enough. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of something big, something that could either bring her closer to happiness or leave her heartbroken. Only time would tell which way it would go. Part 4: Opening Up. Emily had always thought of herself as independent, capable of managing her life on her own terms without getting bogged down by the complexities of relationships. She had built her identity around her freedom from commitment, from emotional entanglements, from anything that might weigh her down. But with Ryan, things had begun to shift. Slowly, gradually, he had slipped into her life, and now, she wasn't sure how to feel about it. On one hand, she genuinely liked him. He was funny, intelligent, and easy to be around. He didn't pressure her, didn't demand too much of her time or emotions. He seemed content to let things unfold naturally, without any expectations. And yet, that very ease was what unsettled her the most. Because for the first time in a long time, Emily wasn't sure if she could just walk away. This wasn't a fling that would burn out after a few weeks or a casual connection she could brush off when things got complicated. Ryan was different. And that scared her. As the weeks turned into months, their relationship grew deeper. They didn't label it, didn't talk about the future or make any grand promises, but there was an undeniable closeness that had developed between them. They spent weekends together, sharing lazy mornings in bed, brunches at cozy cafes, and movie nights on the couch. Ryan became a steady presence in her life, and as much as Emily tried to keep things light, she couldn't ignore the growing feelings she had for him. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Emily was at her apartment, lounging on the couch with a book in hand. She had plans to meet Ryan later that evening for dinner, but for now, she was enjoying a quiet moment to herself. The sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow across the room, and for a brief moment, Emily allowed herself to relax. But her peace was interrupted by the buzzing of her phone on the coffee table. She glanced at the screen and saw a text from Samantha. "Drinks tonight?" Emily smiled to herself, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she considered her response. It had been a while since she and Samantha had gone out for a girls' night, and the idea of catching up over a few cocktails sounded appealing. But then she remembered her plans with Ryan. They had made dinner reservations at a new restaurant downtown, and she didn't want to cancel on him. After all, she had been looking forward to it all week. "Can't tonight," she typed. "Got plans with Ryan." Samantha's reply came quickly. "Again? You're spending a lot of time with him, Em." Emily hesitated for a moment, her eyes lingering on the message. Samantha wasn't wrong. She had been spending more time with Ryan lately, and while she enjoyed it, a part of her couldn't help but feel like she was losing herself in the process. "Is that a bad thing?" she replied, though her heart wasn't fully in it. "Not at all," Samantha wrote back. "But just make sure you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, you know? You've been really careful about keeping things casual, and I just don't want to see you get hurt." Emily sighed, setting her phone down on the table. She knew Samantha meant well, but her words hit a little too close to home. The truth was, Emily had been careful, too careful, in fact. She had spent so much of her adult life avoiding emotional entanglements that now, when she found herself in one, she wasn't sure how to handle it. Part of her wanted to lean into it, to embrace the connection she had with Ryan and see where it could go. But another part of her, the part that had been hurt before, the part that was always cautious, was holding back. What if she got too close? What if things didn't work out? What if she ended up regretting it? "Stop overthinking," she told herself. "Just enjoy it while it lasts." But as the day wore on and her plans with Ryan grew closer, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of something bigger than she had anticipated. That evening, Emily met Ryan at the restaurant, her mind still buzzing with thoughts of Samantha's text. When she arrived, Ryan was already there, seated at a table near the window. He smiled as she approached, standing up to greet her with a hug. "Hey," he said, his voice warm and familiar. "You look great." "Thanks," Emily replied, smiling as she sat down. "So do you." They ordered their drinks and food, and for a while, the conversation flowed easily, just like it always did. But as the night went on, Emily found herself feeling a little more distant than usual, her thoughts swirling with doubts and uncertainties. Ryan seemed to notice, his brow furrowing slightly as he studied her. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice gentle but concerned. Emily blinked, snapping out of her thoughts. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just a lot on my mind, I guess." Ryan nodded, his expression softening. "Want to talk about it?" For a moment, Emily considered opening up to him, telling him about her fears and her struggle to navigate the growing feelings she had for him. but the words caught in her throat, and instead, she just shook her head. "No, it's nothing serious," she said quickly. "Just work stuff." Ryan didn't push her, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something that told her he knew there was more to it than just work. But he let it go, changing the subject to something lighter as they continued their dinner. By the time the meal was over, Emily felt a little more relaxed, though the nagging sense of unease still lingered at the back of her mind. They walked out of the restaurant together, the cool evening air wrapping around them as they strolled down the street. "Do you want to come over?" Ryan asked, his tone casual but hopeful. Emily hesitated, her mind racing with thoughts of everything that had been weighing on her. She liked spending time with Ryan more than she had expected to. But tonight, something felt off. She wasn't sure if it was because of Samantha's text or her own growing fears, but she felt like she needed some space to clear her head. "I think I'm just going to head home," she said softly. "I've got an early morning tomorrow." Ryan nodded, though there was a hint of disappointment in his eyes. "Okay. Let me know if you change your mind." "I will," Emily said, offering him a small smile. "Thanks for dinner." "It was great." They hugged goodbye, and as Emily walked away, she couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Ryan had been nothing but kind and understanding, and yet here she was, pulling away. She didn't know why, but the closer they got, the more she felt the need to protect herself. As she made her way home, Emily's mind raced with thoughts of Ryan and the growing connection between them. She knew she was falling for him, but that realization only made her more anxious. What if she let herself get too close, and it all fell apart? What if she ended up hurt, just like she had been before? "You need to stop thinking so much," she told herself. "Just let things happen." But even as she tried to calm her racing thoughts, Emily knew that letting go wasn't going to be easy. Over the next few days, Emily threw herself into her work, trying to distract herself from the growing feelings she had for Ryan. She took on extra projects, worked late into the night, and did everything she could to keep her mind occupied. But no matter how busy she made herself, thoughts of Ryan continued to creep in. He texted her a few times, asking how she was doing, if she wanted to grab lunch or go for a walk. Emily responded politely, but she found herself making excuses. She was busy with work, she had plans with friends, she needed some time to herself. It wasn't that she didn't want to see him, she did. But every time she thought about spending more time with him, her mind was flooded with doubts. One evening, as she sat at her desk, staring blankly at her computer screen, her phone buzzed with a text from Ryan, "I miss you." Emily's heart skipped a beat at the message, and for a moment, she just stared at the words on the screen. She missed him too, more than she wanted to admit. But the thought of getting too close, of letting herself fall for him completely, terrified her. "I miss you too," she typed back, her fingers hovering over the send button. But just as she was about to hit send, she hesitated. She couldn't do this, not yet. She wasn't ready. Instead, she deleted the message and typed out a quick response, "Hope you're doing well. Been really busy with work, but let's catch up soon." It was a safe reply, one that didn't give too much away. But as soon as she sent it, Emily felt a pang of guilt. She knew she was pulling away, and she didn't know how much longer Ryan would be willing to wait. The next time they saw each other, it was at a party that Samantha had invited them to. Emily hadn't expected Ryan to be there, but when she arrived, she spotted him across the room, chatting with a group of friends. Her heart raced at the sight of him, and for a moment, she considered slipping out before he noticed her. But it was too late. Ryan had already seen her, and he made his way over, his expression warm but cautious. "Hey," he said, his voice soft. "It's been a while." "Yeah," Emily replied, offering him a small smile. "Sorry, I've been swamped with work." Ryan nodded, though there was a flicker of something in his eyes, disappointment, maybe? "I get it. I've missed you, though." Emily's heart clenched at his words, and for a moment, she wasn't sure how to respond. She had been pulling away, distancing herself from him, and yet here he was, still waiting for her. "I've missed you too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Then why are you pushing me away?" Emily's breath caught in her throat, her mind racing as she tried to come up with an answer. She wasn't ready for this conversation, not here, not now. But Ryan deserved the truth. "I'm scared," she said finally, her voice shaky. "I'm scared of getting too close, of letting myself fall for you and then getting hurt." Ryan's eyes softened, and he reached out, gently taking her hand. "I get it. But you don't have to do this alone, Emily. I'm not going anywhere." Emily felt a lump form in her throat, her heart aching with the weight of her own fears. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to explain the tangled mess of emotions swirling inside her. But as she looked into Ryan's eyes, she realized that maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to let go. Part 5: Taking the Leap. As the party continued around them, Emily felt her heart race in the silence that followed her admission. She had never been one to talk about her feelings, especially when it came to relationships. But standing there, with Ryan's hand gently holding hers, she felt more exposed than she ever had before. Ryan's expression softened as he gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "You don't have to be scared," he said quietly, his voice calm and steady. "I know it's not easy to let someone in. But I'm not here to hurt you, Emily." Emily's throat tightened, a mix of guilt and relief swirling inside her. She had spent so much time guarding herself, keeping people at arm's length, that she wasn't sure how to let someone truly be there for her. But Ryan's patience, his understanding, it was something she wasn't used to. And part of her wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not good at letting people get close. I've always been afraid of getting hurt." Ryan nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "I get it. But you don't have to figure it all out at once. We can take it slow. I'm not asking you to be anything you're not ready for. I just want you to let me in, even if it's a little bit at a time." Emily looked down at their joined hands, her mind racing with conflicting thoughts. She liked Ryan a lot more than she had expected to. But the fear of getting too close, of losing control, was still there, gnawing at the edges of her mind. She had always been so careful about protecting herself, about keeping her heart safe from the messiness of relationships. But with Ryan, it felt different. "I don't want to lose myself," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Ryan frowned, his expression thoughtful. "Why do you think you would?" Emily exhaled, struggling to put her feelings into words. "I don't know. I guess I've always been so focused on being independent, on not needing anyone. I'm scared that if I let someone in, I'll lose that part of myself." Ryan's eyes softened with understanding. "You won't lose yourself, Emily. Being with someone doesn't mean you stop being who you are. It just means you have someone to share your life with, someone who supports you. I'm not here to take anything away from you. I'm here to be with you." Emily felt a lump form in her throat, her heart swelling with emotion. She had never thought of it that way before. The idea of being with someone had always felt like a loss of independence, a sacrifice of who she was. But with Ryan, it didn't feel like that. It felt like something else entirely, something that could add to her life rather than take away from it. "I'm scared of losing control," she said softly, her voice barely audible. Ryan smiled gently, his eyes full of warmth. "You don't have to be in control all the time. It's okay to let go sometimes. I'm here for you, Emily. And I'm not going anywhere." For a moment, they stood there in silence, the sounds of the party fading into the background as Emily processed his words. It was scary, letting someone in, allowing herself to be vulnerable. But Ryan wasn't asking for anything she wasn't ready to give. He was patient, kind, and understanding, everything she hadn't realized she needed. Finally, she nodded, her heart racing but steadying with each passing second. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll try." Ryan's smile widened, and he gently pulled her into a hug, wrapping his arms around her in a way that made her feel safe, grounded. Emily closed her eyes, leaning into the warmth of his embrace, feeling a sense of calm settle over her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for now, she was willing to take that first step. In the days that followed, Emily found herself thinking about that conversation with Ryan more often than she expected. There was something about the way he had approached her fears, with patience, with understanding, that made her feel more comfortable than she had in any relationship before. She didn't feel pressured or rushed. Instead, Ryan seemed to know exactly when to give her space and when to offer support. They started spending more time together again, though it was different now. There was an openness between them that hadn't been there before, a quiet understanding that they were both figuring things out as they went. And for the first time, Emily felt like she didn't have to have all the answers. One evening, as they sat on Ryan's couch, watching a movie and eating takeout, Emily found herself glancing over at him, studying the way he looked so relaxed, so at ease in her presence. She had never been in a relationship that felt like this, so easy, so free of the usual drama that she had always associated with love. And the more time she spent with Ryan, the more she realized that maybe, just maybe, this was what she had been missing all along. "You're quiet," Ryan said, glancing over at her with a smile. "What's on your mind?" Emily hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. "I don't know. I guess I'm just thinking about how easy this feels. Like, I'm used to relationships being more complicated. But with you, it's not like that." Ryan smiled, setting his food down on the coffee table. That's a good thing, right? Yeah, Emily said softly, her heart swelling with warmth. It is. Ryan reached over, gently taking her hand in his. I don't think relationships have to be complicated. They just have to be honest. And I think we're doing a pretty good job of that so far. Emily smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. He was right, they had been honest with each other, and that was what made this feel different. There were no games, no guessing what the other person wanted. They were both just themselves. As the movie played on, Emily leaned into Ryan's side, resting her head on his shoulder. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she didn't have to be in control of everything. She could let herself relax, let herself be vulnerable, without worrying about what might happen next. But as things between them continued to deepen, Emily couldn't shake the lingering fear that had always been there in the back of her mind, the fear that, eventually, something would go wrong. It was a fear she had carried with her for years, ever since her last serious relationship had ended in heartbreak. She had promised herself back then that she wouldn't let anyone get that close again, that she wouldn't give someone else the power to hurt her. But now, with Ryan, she could feel herself letting go of that promise. She could feel herself opening up to the possibility of something real, something lasting. And that scared her more than anything. One evening, as they sat in a quiet restaurant, sharing a bottle of wine over dinner, Ryan looked at her with a thoughtful expression. "You've been kind of distant lately," he said gently. "Is everything okay?" Emily blinked, surprised by his question. She hadn't realized she had been pulling back again, but now that he mentioned it, she could see that her old fears had started to creep back in. "I'm sorry," she said softly, setting her wine glass down. "I guess I've just been overthinking things." Ryan nodded, his gaze steady and calm. "Do you want to talk about it?" Emily hesitated, her mind racing with the familiar doubts and fears that had been plaguing her. She didn't want to ruin the moment, didn't want to drag their easy, uncomplicated relationship into something heavier. But at the same time, she knew that Ryan deserved the truth. "I don't know," she said finally, her voice quiet. "I guess I'm just scared of getting too close. I've been in relationships before, and they never ended well. I've always told myself that it's easier to keep things casual, to not let anyone in too deep. But with you, I don't know. It's different." Ryan's expression softened as he reached across the table to take her hand. "I get that. And I know it's not easy to let go of that fear. But I'm here, Emily. I'm not going anywhere." Emily looked down at their joined hands, feeling a mix of relief and uncertainty. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this time would be different. But the fear of getting hurt, of losing herself in the process, was still there. "I don't want to lose myself," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ryan squeezed her hand gently. "You won't. I promise." For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of the conversation hanging in the air between them. But as Emily looked into Ryan's eyes, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. Maybe it wouldn't be easy, maybe there would still be moments of doubt and fear. But with Ryan, she felt like she could take that risk. She felt like she could let go. Part 6. Trusting in the journey. The days that followed Emily's conversation with Ryan were a mixture of relief and lingering doubt. She had opened up to him in a way she hadn't expected, sharing her fears about getting too close, about losing herself in the process. And while Ryan had been understanding, patient, and reassuring, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something still felt unsettled within her. But slowly, she was learning to let go. Ryan had kept his promise to take things slow, never pushing her for more than she was ready to give. Their relationship had become a quiet, steady presence in her life, something she could rely on without the pressure of defining every moment. And for the first time in a long time, Emily allowed herself to simply be, to enjoy the connection she had with Ryan without overanalyzing every step. One evening, after a long day at work, Emily found herself at Ryan's apartment. He had cooked dinner for the two of them, a simple but delicious pasta dish, and they were now sitting on the couch with glasses of wine, watching a movie. The atmosphere was relaxed, comforting, and Emily felt a sense of calm settle over her that she hadn't felt in months. As the movie played on, Ryan shifted slightly, turning to look at her. "You seem more relaxed tonight," he said softly, his voice full of warmth. Emily smiled, feeling a small blush rise to her cheeks. "Yeah, I guess I am. It's been a long week, but this," she gestured around them. "This feels nice." Ryan's smile widened, and he reached over to take her hand. "I'm glad." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the soft glow of the TV screen casting shadows across the room. Emily felt her head lean against Ryan's shoulder, her body sinking deeper into the cushions of the couch. There was something so easy, so natural about being with him, and she found herself wondering why she had been so scared to let this happen. But even as the thought crossed her mind, the familiar pang of doubt began to creep in. What if things didn't last? What if she let herself fall completely, only for everything to fall apart? The uncertainty of it all made her heart race with anxiety. Ryan must have sensed her shift in mood because he gently turned her toward him, his expression filled with concern. "You're overthinking again, aren't you?" he asked quietly, his fingers brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Emily sighed, biting her lip as she looked down at their joined hands. "I guess I am. I don't know why. Things are good, but I can't help but worry that it won't last." Ryan studied her for a moment, his gaze calm and steady. "What if it does?" Emily blinked, surprised by the question. "What do you mean? What if this lasts?" Ryan repeated, his voice soft but firm. "What if we don't fall apart? What if things keep going the way they are, and we figure it out together?" Emily's heart raced as she processed his words. She had spent so much time bracing herself for the worst, for the inevitable end that she believed always came in relationships. But Ryan was offering her a different perspective, a perspective that she hadn't allowed herself to consider. "What if it doesn't?" Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "What if I let myself believe that, and then everything falls apart?" Ryan's expression softened, and he gently cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "Then we'll deal with it together. But I don't think you should spend all your time worrying about what could go wrong. What if things go right? What if this turns into something amazing?" Emily felt a lump form in her throat, her chest tightening with a mix of fear and hope. She had never thought about it like that before. She had always been so focused on protecting herself, on avoiding the pain of heartbreak, that she hadn't allowed herself to fully enjoy the possibility of something good. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice shaking slightly. Ryan smiled gently, his thumb brushing across her cheek. "I know. But I'm here, Emily. And I'm not going anywhere." His words washed over her like a wave of reassurance, and for the first time in a long time, Emily felt herself relax into the moment. Maybe things wouldn't always be easy. Maybe there would be bumps in the road, moments of doubt and fear. But with Ryan, she felt like she could face those challenges head-on, without retreating back into the walls she had built around herself. She leaned in, pressing her forehead against his, her eyes closing as she allowed herself to breathe. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll try." Ryan smiled, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "That's all I'm asking." The following weeks were a period of quiet growth for Emily. Her relationship with Ryan continued to deepen, and while her fears hadn't completely disappeared, they no longer controlled her. She was learning to navigate her doubts, to lean on Ryan when things felt overwhelming, and to trust that she didn't have to have all the answers right away. They spent more time together, enjoying the simple pleasures of everyday life, cooking dinner, watching movies, going for walks in the park. It wasn't the grand, sweeping romance that Emily had once feared would consume her. Instead, it was something steady, something that made her feel grounded and safe. But as their relationship became more serious, Emily found herself facing new challenges. Her old habits of independence and self-reliance were hard to break, and there were moments when she still felt the urge to pull away, to retreat into the familiar comfort of solitude. And while Ryan never pressured her, there were times when she could sense his frustration, moments when he wanted more from her than she was able to give. One evening, as they sat on the couch together, Emily noticed that Ryan seemed quieter than usual. He hadn't said much during dinner, and now, as they sat in the soft glow of the living room, his silence felt heavy. "Is everything okay?" Emily asked, her voice tentative. Ryan looked over at her, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah, everything's fine. I've just been thinking a lot lately." Emily's heart skipped a beat, her mind immediately jumping to the worst-case scenario. "Thinking about what?" Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "About us. About where we're going." Emily swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. "What do you mean?" Ryan hesitated for a moment, then turned to face her fully. "I really like you, Emily. And I've been patient because I know you're still figuring things out. But I guess I just want to know, are you all in? Or are you still holding back?" Emily's chest tightened with anxiety, her mind racing with conflicting emotions. She liked Ryan a lot. And she wanted to be all in, to let herself fully embrace what they had. But the fear of getting hurt, of losing herself, still lingered at the back of her mind. "I'm trying," she said softly, her voice shaky. "I really am. But it's hard for me. I've never been good at this." Ryan nodded slowly, his expression understanding but tinged with sadness. "I get that. And I don't want to rush you. But I guess I just need to know if you see a future here. Because I do. And I don't want to keep going if you're not sure. Emily's heart ached at his words, the weight of his honesty pressing down on her. She knew that Ryan deserved an answer, that he had been patient with her for longer than most people would have been. And the truth was, she did see a future with him, she just hadn't allowed herself to fully believe in it. I do see a future with you, she said quietly, her voice full of emotion. I'm just scared of messing it up. I'm scared of letting you down. Ryan's expression softened, and he reached out to take her hand. You're not going to let me down, Emily. You just have to trust yourself. And trust me. Emily blinked back tears, her heart swelling with gratitude for his patience, his understanding. She knew that if she wanted this to work, she had to take that leap of faith, to let go of the fear that had held her back for so long. I'll try, she whispered, her voice trembling. I'll try to let go. Ryan smiled, his eyes full of warmth and affection. That's all I need. In the days that followed, Emily found herself thinking more and more about Ryan's words. She knew that she had been holding back, that she had been letting her fear of getting hurt control her actions. But now, with Ryan by her side, she realized that she didn't have to do that anymore. She didn't have to be afraid. One evening, as they sat together in her apartment, watching the sunset through the window, Emily took a deep breath and turned to face Ryan. I've been thinking, she said softly. Ryan looked at her, his expression curious. About what? About us, Emily continued, her heart racing. And about what you said the other night. I know I've been holding back, and I'm sorry for that. But I want you to know that I'm all in. I want this. I want us. Ryan's eyes softened, and he reached out to take her hand, his fingers gently intertwining with hers. I'm glad to hear that. Emily smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of what might happen next. She wasn't worried about losing herself or getting hurt. Instead, she felt hopeful that this could be the start of something real, something lasting. As they sat together, watching the last rays of the sun disappear behind the skyline, Emily realized that she had finally found what she had been searching for all along, someone who saw her for who she was, someone who accepted her fears and flaws, and someone who was willing to stand by her side as they faced the future together. And for the first time in her life, Emily was ready to take that leap. Part 7: Meeting the Family. In the weeks that followed Emily's decision to fully commit to her relationship with Ryan, things between them felt different, but in a good way. The tension that had once lingered between them, born from Emily's fear of getting too close, had started to dissipate. She had made a promise to herself to trust in their connection and to stop holding back. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could truly let go. It wasn't that her fears had magically disappeared. They were still there, lurking in the back of her mind, but they no longer controlled her. Whenever the doubts crept in, she reminded herself of Ryan's patience, his understanding, and his unwavering support. He had been there for her every step of the way, never pushing her for more than she was ready to give. And now that she had finally allowed herself to fully embrace their relationship, she felt a sense of freedom she hadn't expected. One Saturday morning, as they lay in bed together, the sunlight streaming through the curtains, Emily found herself smiling. She and Ryan had spent the night before at a small concert in the city, dancing and laughing together, and now they were enjoying a lazy morning, wrapped up in the warmth of each other's presence. Ryan stirred beside her, stretching before turning to face her with a sleepy grin. "You're up early," he said, his voice rough from sleep. Emily laughed softly, reaching out to brush a strand of hair away from his face. "Not really. You're just a heavy sleeper." He chuckled, pulling her closer. "Guilty." They lay there in comfortable silence for a few moments, the only sound being the faint hum of the city outside the window. Emily felt a sense of contentment wash over her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. She had always been so focused on moving forward, on achieving her goals and maintaining control over her life, that she had never taken the time to simply enjoy the present. But with Ryan, everything seemed to slow down. She could breathe, relax, and just be. "So," Ryan said after a while, his voice thoughtful, "I've been meaning to ask you something." Emily turned her head to look at him, her heart skipping a beat. "What is it?" Ryan hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "My sister's getting married in a few weeks. I'd really like for you to come with me." Emily blinked, surprised by the request. She hadn't met Ryan's family yet, and the thought of being introduced to them at such an important event felt a little overwhelming. But at the same time, a part of her was touched that he wanted her to be there with him, to share in something so meaningful. "Your sister's wedding?" she asked, her voice soft. "Are you sure you want me there?" "Of course I do," Ryan replied, his smile widening. "You're important to me, and I want you to be a part of my life, every part of it." Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. He had always been open about his feelings for her, never hesitating to let her know how much he cared. And now, as she looked into his eyes, she realized just how much she cared about him too. "I'd love to go," she said quietly, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Thank you for asking me." Ryan grinned, leaning in to kiss her softly. "It'll be fun, I promise." As they lay there together, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation for what was to come. She had never been one to think too far ahead when it came to relationships, but with Ryan, she found herself looking forward to the future. The idea of meeting his family, of being a part of his life in a more significant way, was both thrilling and terrifying. But this time, she was ready to embrace it. The day of the wedding arrived sooner than Emily had expected, and as she stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the straps of her dress, she felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach. She and Ryan had driven out to a small town just outside the city for the event, and now they were getting ready in the charming bed and breakfast where the wedding party was staying. Ryan appeared behind her in the mirror, straightening his tie as he smiled at her reflection. "You look beautiful," he said softly, his eyes filled with admiration. Emily blushed, turning to face him. "You clean up pretty well yourself." He laughed, stepping forward to wrap his arms around her waist. "You ready for this?" Emily took a deep breath, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and anxiety. "I think so. But I'm nervous. I've never been to a wedding with a boyfriend before." Ryan's smile softened, and he leaned in to kiss her forehead. "You'll be fine. My family's going to love you. Just be yourself." She smiled, feeling reassured by his words. Ryan had always had a way of calming her, of making her feel like everything was going to be okay. And now, as she prepared to meet his family for the first time, she reminded herself that she didn't have to be perfect. She just had to be herself. They arrived at the wedding venue, a picturesque outdoor garden surrounded by lush greenery and twinkling lights. The ceremony was intimate, with only close family and friends in attendance, and Emily felt a sense of awe as she took in the beauty of the scene. As they found their seats, Ryan's mother approached them with a warm smile. "Ryan, it's so good to see you," she said, pulling him into a hug before turning to Emily. "And you must be Emily. I've heard so much about you." Emily smiled, feeling a little more at ease. "It's great to meet you." Ryan's mother studied her for a moment, her smile widening. "Well, you're just as lovely as Ryan said you were. I'm so glad you could join us." As they exchanged pleasantries, Emily found herself feeling more relaxed. Ryan's family was kind and welcoming, and any fears she had about making a good impression started to fade. Throughout the ceremony and reception, she mingled with his relatives, sharing laughs and stories, and by the end of the night, she felt like she had truly become a part of his world. Later, as they danced together under the twinkling lights of the garden, Ryan leaned in close, his lips brushing against her ear. "Thank you for being here with me," he whispered. "It means a lot." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with affection. "I wouldn't have missed it for the world." As they swayed to the music, Emily realized that something had shifted within her. She had spent so much of her life guarding herself, keeping people at a distance to avoid getting hurt. But with Ryan, she had learned that love didn't have to be scary. It didn't have to mean losing herself or sacrificing her independence. It could be something that added to her life, something that made her feel stronger, more complete. For the first time, Emily felt like she had truly let go of the fear that had once held her back. And as she danced with Ryan, wrapped up in the warmth of his embrace, she knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The weeks that followed the wedding were some of the happiest Emily had experienced in a long time. She and Ryan were growing closer every day, and the fear and uncertainty that had once clouded her thoughts seemed to melt away. Their relationship was solid, grounded in trust, communication, and a deep understanding of each other's needs. But even as things were going well, Emily couldn't help but notice that Ryan had been acting a little distant lately. He was still the same caring, attentive boyfriend he had always been, but there was a subtle shift in his behavior that she couldn't quite put her finger on. One evening, as they sat on the couch together, Ryan's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at the screen, his expression briefly tightening before he set the phone aside. Emily noticed the change in his demeanor and felt a twinge of concern. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice soft. Ryan hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yeah, just work stuff. Nothing to worry about." But Emily wasn't convinced. There was something in his tone, something in the way he had quickly dismissed the conversation, that made her feel uneasy. She didn't want to push him, but the distance between them was starting to weigh on her. As the days went by, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Ryan had become more withdrawn, and while he still spent time with her, there was a sense of detachment in his actions. He seemed distracted, preoccupied, and Emily couldn't help but wonder if it had something to do with their relationship. Finally, one evening, after a particularly quiet dinner, Emily decided to confront him. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when she could clearly feel the growing distance between them. "Ryan," she said softly, her heart pounding in her chest. "Is something going on? You've been acting different lately." Ryan looked at her, his expression conflicted. For a moment, he seemed to struggle with what to say, his eyes filled with a mix of emotions that Emily couldn't quite read. Finally, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "There's something I need to tell you," he said quietly. Emily's heart sank, her mind racing with all the possibilities of what he might say. Had she done something wrong? Was he having doubts about their relationship? The uncertainty was almost too much to bear. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ryan took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers. "I've been offered a job. A really great opportunity. But it's in another city." Emily stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She hadn't been expecting that. Of all the things she had imagined he might say, this hadn't even crossed her mind. "Another city," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where?" "Chicago," Ryan said, his expression pained. "It's a big promotion, something I've been working toward for a long time. But I don't know what to do." Emily's mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. Chicago was far, too far for a casual visit, too far for them to see each other regularly. The idea of a long-distance relationship hadn't even been on her radar, and now, suddenly, it was staring her in the face. "What are you thinking?" she asked, her voice shaking with uncertainty. Ryan hesitated, his eyes filled with conflict. "I don't know. I want to take the job, it's an amazing opportunity. But I don't want to lose you." Emily felt a lump form in her throat, her heart aching at his words. This was exactly what she had feared all along, the possibility that something would come between them, that the future they had been building would suddenly feel uncertain. And now, it seemed like that fear had become a reality. Part 8, Distance and Doubt. The words hung in the air between them, the weight of Ryan's revelation settling heavily on Emily's heart. Chicago. It was far from where they were now, far enough that the idea of maintaining their relationship felt uncertain, even daunting. Emily had never imagined she'd be faced with a situation like this, especially not when things were finally going so well between them. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. How could they make it work if he moved? What would happen to their relationship? The idea of being separated by so much distance felt overwhelming, and the fear of losing what they had built together loomed large in her mind. "Chicago," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible as she repeated the name of the city. "That's far." Ryan sighed, his expression filled with conflict. "I know. Believe me, I've been thinking about this nonstop ever since I got the offer. It's a big step for my career, but I don't want to leave you behind." Emily looked down at her hands, her mind swirling with emotions she couldn't quite process. This wasn't something she had ever anticipated. When they had started seeing each other, she had been so focused on the present, on navigating her fears and learning to let Ryan in, that she hadn't even considered the possibility of something like this. And now, the future they had been building together felt suddenly fragile, like it could all fall apart with one decision. "What are you thinking?" Ryan asked, his voice gentle but filled with concern. Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I don't know," she admitted. "I didn't see this coming. And now, I just don't know what to do." Ryan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. His touch was warm, reassuring, but it did little to ease the knot of anxiety that had formed in her chest. "I don't want to lose you, Emily," he said softly. "But I also don't want to hold you back. If long distance isn't something you're comfortable with, I understand. I don't know how to make this decision." Emily looked up at him, her heart aching at the vulnerability in his eyes. She knew how important this opportunity was for him, how much he had worked for it. And the last thing she wanted was to stand in the way of his dreams. But the thought of being a part of navigating the challenges of a long-distance relationship filled her with doubt. "I don't want to hold you back either," she said quietly. "I know how much this means to you, and I want you to take it if it's what you really want. But I'm scared, Ryan. I'm scared that if you go, we won't be able to make it work." Ryan's grip on her hand tightened slightly, his expression pained. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "But I'm willing to try if you are. I don't want this to be the end of us." Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she processed his words. The idea of long distance terrified her. She had seen relationships fall apart under the strain of distance, and the thought of going through that herself filled her with anxiety. But at the same time, she couldn't imagine her life without Ryan. He had become such an important part of her world, and the thought of letting him go felt just as unbearable as the idea of being apart. "I don't know if I'm good at long distance," she said, her voice trembling. "I've never done it before. But I know I don't want to lose you. I'm scared of how hard it'll be." Ryan smiled softly, his thumb gently rubbing circles on the back of her hand. "I'm scared too. But I think if we're both committed to making it work, we can get through it. It won't be easy, but nothing worth having ever is." Emily swallowed hard, her emotions swirling in a chaotic mix of fear, love, and uncertainty. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that they could make it work despite the distance. But the doubts still lingered, nagging at the back of her mind. "Do you really think we can do this?" she asked, her voice filled with vulnerability. Ryan nodded, his gaze steady and full of conviction. "I do. But only if we both want it." Emily stared at him for a long moment, her mind racing with possibilities. She thought about everything they had been through together, the fears she had overcome, the walls she had let down, the way Ryan had always been there for her, no matter how much she had tried to push him away. And in that moment, she realized that she didn't want to give up on them. Not now. Not when they had come so far. "I want it," she whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. "I want us." Ryan's smile widened, relief flooding his expression. "Then we'll make it work. I promise." Emily exhaled, the weight of the decision settling over her like a heavy but comforting blanket. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, moments of doubt, and days when the distance felt unbearable. But she was willing to try, because what she had with Ryan was worth fighting for. Over the next few weeks, as Ryan prepared for his move to Chicago, Emily found herself grappling with a mix of emotions. There were moments of excitement, talks about visiting each other, exploring a new city together, and keeping their connection alive despite the distance. But there were also moments of fear, late-night doubts about how long they could sustain the relationship, worries about how much the distance would change things, and the nagging fear that something would eventually pull them apart. But through it all, Ryan remained a constant source of reassurance. He reminded her that they were in this together, that they were both committed to making it work. And slowly, Emily began to trust in that. One evening, as they sat together in Ryan's apartment, surrounded by boxes as he packed for his move, Emily found herself feeling a deep sense of gratitude for what they had built. Despite the uncertainty of the future, she knew that they had come a long way. And no matter what happened next, she was proud of the progress they had made, both as individuals and as a couple. "You know," Ryan said, glancing over at her with a smile. "I think we're going to be okay." Emily looked at him, her heart swelling with affection. "Yeah," she said softly. "I think so too." The day of Ryan's move came faster than Emily had anticipated. As they stood together at the train station, waiting for his departure, the reality of the situation hit her harder than she had expected. This wasn't just a visit. He was moving to a different city, and their relationship was about to change in ways she couldn't fully predict. "I'm going to miss you," Ryan said quietly, his arms wrapped around her in a tight embrace. Emily buried her face in his chest, her heart aching with the weight of the moment. "I'm going to miss you too." They stood there for a long time, neither of them wanting to let go. But eventually, the train's announcement echoed through the station, signaling that it was time for Ryan to board. Ryan pulled back slightly, cupping her face in his hands as he looked into her eyes. "We're going to make this work," he said firmly. "No matter what." Emily nodded, blinking back the tears that threatened to spill over. "I know." They shared a long, lingering kiss, and then, with one final hug, Ryan turned and boarded the train. Emily watched as the doors closed behind him, her heart heavy with a mixture of sadness and hope. As the train pulled away from the platform, Emily stood there, feeling the weight of the distance between them for the first time. It was real now, the long-distance relationship they had both agreed to try. And while the road ahead felt uncertain, she knew that they had something worth fighting for. She took a deep breath, her heart still heavy but filled with determination. They would face the challenges ahead, just as they had faced everything else, together. And in that moment, Emily realized that love wasn't about having all the answers or knowing exactly what the future held. It was about trusting in the journey, in each other, and in the belief that they could make it through, no matter what came their way. Part 9: Love Across the Miles. The first few weeks after Ryan's move to Chicago were an adjustment for Emily in ways she hadn't anticipated. The distance felt strange, like a part of her daily routine was suddenly missing. She was used to seeing him regularly, spending evenings together, and sharing the little moments of life that made their relationship feel grounded and intimate. Now, those moments had to be shared through phone calls, text messages, and the occasional video chat, and while it wasn't the same, they were both determined to make it work. At first, They spoke every day. Ryan would call her on his way to work, and they'd talk during his lunch break or late at night when he got home. Their conversations were filled with updates about their days, teasing jokes, and reassurances that they missed each other. And while it wasn't the same as being physically together, it was enough to keep Emily feeling connected to him. But as the weeks went on, the reality of long distance started to set in. Ryan's new job was demanding, and as he settled into his role, the long hours began to take a toll on their communication. Their phone calls became shorter, their texts less frequent, and there were days when they barely had time to speak at all. Emily understood that Ryan was busy. She knew how much this job meant to him, but the growing distance, both physical and emotional, was hard to ignore. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Emily found herself sitting on her couch, staring at her phone. She had sent Ryan a text hours ago, but he still hadn't responded. It wasn't the first time this had happened. He had been caught up in meetings or late-night work sessions before, but tonight, it felt heavier. The silence felt more noticeable. As she sat there, her mind racing with thoughts of doubt and worry, her phone buzzed with a new message. Her heart leapt, hoping it was Ryan, but when she glanced at the screen, it was just Samantha, asking if she wanted to grab drinks. Emily sighed, typing a quick response to her friend. "Not tonight. Just feeling off. Maybe this weekend?" Samantha's reply was quick. "Everything okay?" Emily hesitated, staring at the screen. She didn't know how to explain what she was feeling, how to put into words the slow, creeping fear that the distance between her and Ryan was starting to affect their relationship in ways she hadn't expected. She didn't want to burden Samantha with her worries, especially when she wasn't even sure how to express them clearly. "Yeah, just tired," she finally typed. "We'll catch up soon." After sending the message, Emily tossed her phone onto the couch beside her and leaned back, closing her eyes. She knew she needed to give Ryan time to settle into his new life in Chicago. The adjustment was hard on both of them, and she didn't want to make things more difficult by pushing him for more than he could give at the moment. But at the same time, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the distance growing heavier with each passing day. The following weekend, Ryan finally called. It was late in the evening, and Emily had been lying in bed, reading a book to distract herself from the nagging thoughts in her mind. When her phone buzzed, and she saw his name on the screen, a mix of relief and nervousness washed over her. "Hey," Ryan said, his voice tired but warm. "I'm sorry it's been a while. Work's been crazy." Emily smiled, though the tightness in her chest didn't completely go away. "I figured. How's everything going?" Ryan sighed, the sound heavy with exhaustion. "It's good. Really good, actually. The job's a lot more demanding than I expected, but I'm learning a lot. I miss you, though. I hate that we haven't been able to talk as much." Emily's heart softened at his words. She had missed him too, more than she had let on, and hearing him say it out loud made her feel less alone in her worries. "I miss you too," she said quietly. "It's been hard not being able to talk as much. But I know you're busy, and I'm really proud of you." "Thanks," Ryan replied, his voice filled with gratitude. "I just don't want this distance to pull us apart. I feel like I'm failing you by not being able to give you more of my time." Emily's heart ached at the vulnerability in his voice. She knew that this was hard for him too, and the last thing she wanted was for him to feel like he wasn't enough. "You're not failing me, Ryan. I know this is tough, and I don't expect you to be available all the time. I miss you. And I miss us." Ryan was silent for a moment, and Emily could almost hear him thinking on the other end of the line. Finally, he spoke, his voice soft but determined. "I'm coming to visit. I don't care how busy work is, I need to see you." Emily's heart skipped a beat, a rush of excitement flooding her chest. "Really? When?" "Next weekend," Ryan said firmly. "I'll book a flight tomorrow. We need this." Emily smiled, relief washing over her like a wave. "We do. I can't wait to see you." The rest of their conversation flowed more easily after that, and by the time they hung up, Emily felt lighter, more hopeful. The idea of seeing Ryan in person, of being able to hold him and talk to him face to face, made the distance feel less daunting. And for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to believe that they could make this work, that their relationship could survive the challenges of long distance. The following weekend, Emily stood at the airport, nervously scanning the arrivals board. Ryan's flight had landed, and now she just had to wait for him to come through the gates. Her heart raced with anticipation, a mixture of excitement and nerves coursing through her as she clutched her phone in her hand. When she finally spotted him walking toward her, a grin spread across her face. He looked a little tired from the flight, but the moment their eyes met, all the tension from the past few weeks seemed to melt away. "Hey, you," Ryan said with a smile as he approached, pulling her into a tight hug. Emily wrapped her arms around him, feeling the familiar warmth of his embrace. It felt so good to be with him again, to feel his presence next to hers after so many weeks apart. "I missed you so much," she whispered into his shoulder. "I missed you too," Ryan replied, pressing a soft kiss to the top of her head. "It's so good to see you." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other as the bustle of the airport carried on around them. For Emily, it felt like a weight had been lifted off her chest, like the distance that had been stretching between them was finally gone, even if only for a little while. As they made their way out of the airport and headed back to her apartment, the conversation flowed easily, just like it always had. They talked about Ryan's job, about Emily's projects at work, about all the little things they hadn't been able to share over the phone. And for the first time in weeks, Emily felt like everything was back to normal. That weekend, they spent as much time together as possible, making the most of Ryan's short visit. They went out for dinner, explored the city, and spent quiet moments at her apartment, just talking and enjoying each other's company. It felt like a reset for their relationship, a reminder of why they were doing this, why they were fighting to make it work despite the distance. But as the weekend drew to a close, and Ryan prepared to head back to Chicago, the familiar weight of uncertainty began to creep back in. They had managed to make the most of their time together, but now, the reality of long distance was setting in again. And as Emily watched Ryan pack his suitcase, the fear of what lay ahead gnawed at the edges of her mind. "What if this gets harder?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if the distance becomes too much?" Ryan looked up from his suitcase, his expression serious but full of determination. "It's going to be hard, Emily. but I'm not giving up on us. We'll make it work. We just have to keep talking, keep visiting each other. We can do this. Emily nodded, her heart heavy but hopeful. She believed him, she believed in what they had, and she wasn't ready to let go. But she also knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more days when the distance felt unbearable, more moments of doubt and fear. But as long as they were both committed to making it work, she knew they could get through it. I'm in this with you, she said quietly, stepping forward to take his hand. No matter how hard it gets. Ryan smiled, pulling her into a tight embrace. I'm in this too. For the long haul. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other as the weight of their commitment settled between them. It wasn't going to be easy, but they had made it this far. And as Emily held on to Ryan, feeling the steady beat of his heart against hers, she knew that they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. They were in this together. Part 10, A Heartbreaking Decision. The weeks following Ryan's visit were a mixture of hope and frustration for Emily. On one hand, the time they had spent together had reassured her that their relationship was worth fighting for. She could still feel the warmth of his embrace, the sound of his laughter, and the familiar comfort of being in his presence. But on the other hand, the return to their long-distance reality was harder than she had anticipated. They spoke on the phone almost every day, but the time difference and their busy schedules often made it difficult to connect for more than a few minutes at a time. Their conversations were often rushed, quick updates about their day, a few words of affection, and then back to the grind of their respective lives. Emily tried not to let it bother her, but the distance was beginning to take a toll. One evening, as she sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through her phone and waiting for Ryan to call, she felt a wave of frustration wash over her. It had been 2 days since they had last spoken, and while she knew Ryan was busy with work, the silence between them felt more pronounced than usual. She missed him, missed the way they used to talk, the way they used to be able to just sit and enjoy each other's company without the pressure of time constraints or distance. When her phone finally rang, she answered quickly, her heart racing with a mixture of relief and anxiety. "Hey," she said, trying to keep her tone light. "I was starting to think you forgot about me." Ryan chuckled softly on the other end of the line, but there was a tension in his voice that Emily hadn't noticed before. "Sorry about that. Things have been crazy here with work." Emily sighed, leaning back in her chair. "I get it. I just miss you, that's all." "I miss you too," Ryan replied, though his voice sounded distant. "I've been thinking a lot lately, about us." Emily's heart skipped a beat, her mind immediately jumping to the worst-case scenario. "What do you mean?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and Emily could feel her stomach twist with anxiety. Finally, Ryan spoke, his voice hesitant but firm. "I don't know if this is working." The words hit Emily like a punch to the gut, her chest tightening with a mix of shock and fear. "What do you mean?" she asked again, her voice trembling. "I mean, the distance," Ryan said slowly, as if weighing each word carefully. "It's been harder than I expected. I feel like we're just going through the motions, and I hate that. I don't want us to feel like an obligation, you know?" Emily swallowed hard, her heart racing as she tried to process his words. She had been so focused on keeping their relationship alive that she hadn't fully considered how the distance might be affecting him. She had assumed that as long as they kept talking, kept visiting each other, they could make it work. But now, hearing the doubt in Ryan's voice, she realized that maybe it wasn't that simple. "So, what are you saying?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan sighed, the sound heavy with emotion. "I'm not saying I want to end things. But I think we need to figure out if this is something we can sustain long term. I love you, Emily. But I don't want us to drift apart because we're too far away from each other." Emily's heart clenched at his words. This was what she had feared all along, that the distance would become too much, that they would slowly drift apart until there was nothing left. She had always known that long-distance relationships were difficult, but she hadn't expected it to feel like this, like a slow unraveling of something that had once been so strong. "I love you too," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "I don't want to lose you." "I don't want to lose you either," Ryan replied, his voice breaking slightly. "But I also don't want us to get to a point where we're just hanging on for the sake of it. I want us to be happy, Emily." Emily wiped away the tears that had started to well up in her eyes, her heart aching with the weight of the conversation. She knew that Ryan was right, they couldn't keep going like this, with both of them feeling the strain of the distance but not talking about it. They needed to find a solution, a way to move forward that didn't feel like they were just treading water. "I don't know what the solution is," Emily admitted, her voice shaky. "I hate the distance. I hate not being able to see you, to be with you. But I don't know how to fix it." There was another long pause, and when Ryan finally spoke, his voice was quiet but determined. "I think we need to have a real conversation about the future. About what we both want." Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "Yeah, I think you're right." The days that followed were filled with reflection for Emily. She thought about her relationship with Ryan, about how far they had come, and about the challenges they had faced along the way. She loved him, she knew that with certainty. But the reality of their situation was undeniable. The distance was hard, and it wasn't going to get easier unless they made some difficult decisions. A few days later, Emily and Ryan had the conversation they both knew was coming. It was a long, emotional talk about their future, about what they wanted for themselves and for each other. They talked about the possibility of one of them moving, of making a real, tangible commitment to closing the distance between them. But in the end, it came down to a simple truth: they both wanted different things. Ryan's career in Chicago was taking off, and he wasn't ready to leave. He was passionate about his work, and Emily couldn't ask him to give that up. But at the same time, Emily's life was here. Her job, her friends, her family, everything she had built for herself was in the city, and she wasn't ready to uproot her life for a relationship that, despite their best efforts, was beginning to feel fragile. It was a heartbreaking realization, but as they talked it through, both of them came to the same conclusion: they loved each other, but they couldn't keep going like this. The distance had become too much, and they were both holding on to a version of their relationship that no longer existed. "I'm sorry," Ryan said quietly, his voice filled with sadness. "I never wanted it to end like this." Emily wiped away the tears that had started to fall, her heart breaking at the thought of losing him. I didn't either. But maybe this is what we need. Maybe it's time to let go. There was a long silence between them, both of them processing the weight of their decision. It wasn't easy, it was one of the hardest things Emily had ever done, but deep down, she knew it was the right choice. They had given it everything they had, but sometimes, love wasn't enough to overcome the obstacles life put in their way. I'll always care about you, Ryan said softly, his voice breaking slightly. You've meant so much to me. Emily smiled through her tears, her heart full of love and sadness. You've meant so much to me too. With one final goodbye, they ended the call, and Emily was left alone with the silence of her apartment. The weight of their breakup settled over her like a heavy blanket, and for a long time, she just sat there, letting the emotions wash over her. It wasn't the ending she had wanted, but it was the one that felt right. In the weeks that followed, Emily slowly began to heal. The pain of losing Ryan was still there, but she found solace in the knowledge that they had made the right choice. They had loved each other deeply, but sometimes, love wasn't enough to overcome the practical realities of life. And while it hurt to let go, Emily knew that this was a new chapter for both of them, a chance to grow and move forward in their own lives. She threw herself into her work, spent more time with friends, and began to focus on herself in ways she hadn't before. The fear of losing herself that had once held her back was gone, replaced by a newfound sense of strength and independence. And while the memories of her time with Ryan would always be a part of her, Emily knew that she was ready for whatever came next. She had learned that love, while powerful, wasn't always enough to make things last. But it didn't have to be. Sometimes, the most important love was the love you found within yourself, the strength to keep moving forward, even when things didn't go the way you had planned. As she stood on her balcony one evening, watching the sun set over the city, Emily took a deep breath, feeling the cool breeze against her skin. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. She was ready. And the story ends here. Thanks for watching.